Hey, you. Step closer. The red walls of the Forbidden City do not echo with drums or bells tonight. They breathe with whispers. Whispers carried not by emperors or queens, but by those who should have had no power at all. The eunuchs, shadows carved from flesh, guardians of secrets. Men remade into something neither fully servant nor master. Do you dare follow their steps into the silence that ruled an empire? You walk through the vermilion gates of the Forbidden City, where stone lions glare with unblinking eyes. The courtyard is wide, paved in grey brick, but the silence here feels heavier than stone. Guards in armor stand at a distance, yet the true barrier is not them. It is the eunuchs. They line the passage in their dark silk robes, faces pale beneath the shadows of their black hats. Their eyes glance once, then fall, but nothing escapes them. They carry no swords, yet hold power sharper than steel. For they are the gatekeepers, the living locks of the emperor's world. Concubines pause before them, their jeweled veils trembling. Ministers bow, scrolls clutched tight in nervous hands. Even generals who command 10,000 troops lower their gaze when passing a eunuch at the gate. Because here at the entrance to the Dragon Throne, no one sees the emperor unless the eunuchs permit it. Historians still argue about the extent of their control. Some say eunuchs were merely attendants, loyal servants who never dared to interfere. Others insist they controlled access so tightly that they became the true power behind the throne, deciding who rose and who fell with a nod or a pause. The records are contradictory, yet the fear written in diaries of visiting officials tells its own truth. You step closer. A eunuch raises his hand, slender, pale, and motionless. He says nothing. Yet the meaning is clear. Stop. Behind him, the vermilion doors remain shut, carved with golden studs that catch the weak light of dusk. The eunuch's silence feels like judgment. His eyes do not waver, but his presence is a question. Who are you to seek the Son of Heaven? What secret do you carry behind your lips? A story drifts through the centuries of a minister who dared to bribe the wrong eunuch. The gates did not open for him again. His name vanished from the court records within weeks, erased as though he had never served. Was it the emperor's will or the eunuch's quiet decision? Scholars still debate, but the silence of the palace leans toward the latter. You remain before the gates, the weight of their gaze pressing heavier than armor. The emperor is within but unreachable. The eunuchs stand between. And in the hush a whisper curls against your ear, low and intimate. The key to the Dragon Throne is not gold or sword. It is silence in the hands of those who have nothing left to lose. The vermilion doors shudder. The eunuchs step aside, and you are drawn deeper into their world. You follow the eunuchs deeper into the Forbidden City, past vermilion doors and courtyards where shadows stretch like black rivers. Their silence clings to you, heavy and suffocating. And then, as though history itself wishes to bear its cruelty, the memory of their beginning rises. To be a eunuch was not a calling. It was a cutting. They were boys once, farmers' sons, prisoners of war, or children sold by desperate families. Some were tricked with promises of palace service, others forced. But all passed through the same threshold, the knife. The ritual was brutal. Flesh severed, blood pooling on cold stone, life split in two. Some never rose again, their screams swallowed by earth. Those who survived bore scars that never healed, wounds not only of body but of identity. Historians still debate the details. Some chronicles speak of crude operations performed in secret rooms, the instruments little more than blades heated in fire. Others describe a more ritualized process. Incense burning, chants murmured, the severed flesh sealed in a jar and carried with the eunuch for the rest of his life. Was it superstition or remembrance? Scholars cannot agree. Yet the jars appear again and again in stories, like silent companions to men remade against their will. You imagine it now. A boy clutching his father's hand, led into a room that smells of smoke and iron. He does not return as the same child. His body altered, his voice changed, his fate carved by pain. From that moment, he is no longer son, no longer man. He becomes shadow. And yet within this suffering lay a door. The emperor's court was sealed to most, but open to eunuchs, because they were deemed safe, unable to sire heirs. Unable to threaten dynasties, they were permitted where others were barred. The women's quarters, the imperial bedchamber, the innermost chambers of power. It is a paradox. Mutilation became privilege. Silence became key. One tale speaks of a eunuch named Sun, taken from his village at 9 years old. After his cutting, he was sent to the palace stables, scrubbing floors. Years later, he held the emperor's seal in his hand, controlling decrees that shaped provinces. His family never saw him again, but his name was whispered in every corridor of power. Was this cruelty or destiny? Historians wrestle with the question still. But the eunuchs themselves knew. Their loss was their weapon. You hear footsteps echo behind you. A eunuch passes, robes swaying, his gaze fixed ahead. You wonder what he remembers, the blade, the jar, the scream. Does he dream of it? Or has he buried it beneath layers of silk and silence? The lamps gutter. The night deepens, and a whisper unfurls, soft and merciless. To serve the dragon, you must first be unmade. You pass beneath another vermilion arch, and the world shifts. The outer courtyards fall away, replaced by hushed corridors draped in silk. Lanterns flicker against carved beams, painting shadows that stretch like claws across the floor. And in those shadows the eunuchs wait. They are everywhere. They're carrying scrolls, pouring tea, arranging the emperor's robes, tending the concubines' lamps. Always silent, always watching. Their steps leave no sound, yet every whisper in the forbidden city finds its way into their ears. The concubines know it. Behind embroidered veils, they lean close to one another, trading secrets like jewels. Who is favored tonight? Who carries suspicion? Who has fallen from grace? But the eunuchs hear them all. They carry these whispers like invisible coins, to be spent when power shifts demand it. Historians still debate their role. Some insist eunuchs were mere servants, faithful and mute, bound by fear of punishment. Others argue they became the palace's greatest informants, feeding secrets from the women's quarters to ministers, and from ministers back to the throne. Was the emperor sovereign, or did the eunuchs, with ears pressed against red walls, decide what he heard? The records murmur but never answer. You pause near a lattice window and the voices filter through. A concubine, her tone sweet as honey, speaks of betrayal. Another, lower and trembling, swears loyalty. The words are soft, but the eunuch at her side hears every syllable. He does not speak. He does not even look. But later perhaps those words will return to the emperor, reshaped, sharpened, deadly. One tale lingers in the archives, a concubine accused of mocking the Son of Heaven. No witness stood against her, only the report of a eunuch. She vanished within days, her name stricken from records. Did she ever speak those words, or did silence sharpen them into accusation? Scholars cannot decide, but the red walls remember. You move deeper. The lamps sway. The eunuchs glide past, carrying trays of fruit, bowls of perfume, scrolls bound in silk. Each step is ordinary, yet beneath it lies control. They are not men, not officials, not nobles. Yet they decide who enters, who leaves, who survives the night. The corridor grows colder. You lean against a pillar, and for an instant, you hear whispers not from mouths, but from the walls themselves. We hear everything. We forget nothing. The sound fades. The eunuchs remain. The red walls keep their silence. You step into the innermost court, where the very air trembles with ceremony. Incense drifts upward in slow coils. Drums throb faintly in the distance, and every surface gleams with lacquered red and gold. At the center of it all sits the dragon throne, empty for now yet radiating presence. Beside it, in the penumbra of power, stand the eunuchs. They are not rulers. They wear no crowns, hold no titles of nobility, and yet they never leave the emperor's side. When he rises, they rise. When he eats, they taste first. When he speaks, they lean close enough to catch every breath. Historians still debate their intimacy. Some describe eunuchs as little more than shadows, obeying without question. Others insist the emperor depended on them more than ministers, trusting them to guard secrets too delicate for courtiers' ears. One chronicle even claims the emperor may have 1,000 advisors, but his closest voice is the one who cannot father a son. You watch as a eunuch adjusts the cushion on the throne, smoothing silk with hands steady and reverent. Another sets down a jade cup, bowing so low his forehead nearly touches the lacquered floor. These gestures are simple, menial, and yet within them lies immense power. For the emperor trusts the hand that pours his drink more than the hand that commands an army. Stories persist of emperors undone by their shadows. One Ming ruler was said to confide his deepest fears not to generals or ministers, but to a single eunuch, whose whispers soon outweighed the empire's laws. Another tale speaks of the Wanli emperor, whose reign grew stagnant as eunuchs shielded him from court, controlling who was seen, what was heard, what was remembered. Were these exaggerations or glimpses of truth? Scholars still argue. You feel it in the silence. The throne is grand but fragile. The emperor's power shines like fire, but the eunuchs are the oil that feeds it, or the hands that could smother it. The lamps flicker, and you hear it, the faint sound of breath behind you. You turn, and a eunuch stands there close enough to feel his presence. He says nothing. He does not bow. He only waits. The silence presses in, heavy as the walls, and then a whisper, low and intimate, curls against your ear. Even the Son of Heaven cannot rise without his shadow. The throne gleams. The shadow lingers, and you are drawn deeper still. The scrolls of dynasties are filled with contradictions, their ink heavy with bias and fear. One historian paints the eunuchs as loyal servants, bound by suffering to absolute obedience. Another writes them as traitors, parasitic shadows gnawing at the throne until empires crumbled. The truth flickers like lamplight in a draught, shifting with each turn of the page. Confucian scholars steeped in tradition despised them. They called eunuchs abominations, unnatural men who twisted order itself. To these writers, every decline of dynasty bore the stain of eunuch corruption. They recorded names like Wei Zhongxian, the infamous eunuch of the Ming court, as monsters cloaked in silk, villains who manipulated emperors, punished rivals, and fattened their own power until collapse was inevitable. Yet palace records tell another story. Eunuchs appear in ledgers as guardians of treasures, builders of palaces, diplomats who carried messages across borders. Some were praised for loyalty so pure it bordered on devotion, serving emperors in silence until their last breath. One Ming emperor grieving is said to have wept over the death of a eunuch who had raised him like a father. Which is true? Perhaps both. For every tale of betrayal there is one of sacrifice. For every story of poison, another of protection. But history was rarely written by eunuchs themselves. Their voices, if recorded at all, were filtered through the pens of ministers who loathed them, or rulers who feared them. What remains is suspicion embalmed as fact. You linger in a chamber where scrolls rest on carved stands. Dust clings to silk bindings, their seals cracked with age. As you reach for one, a whisper drifts through the silence. Do not trust the ink. Trust the shadows. The words vanish, but the thought remains. Were eunuchs demons in silk, or men broken and remade into instruments of survival? Historians still argue, their voices echoing across centuries. But the red walls remember a truth deeper than ink. The lamps flicker low. The scroll slips from your hand, and the silence feels heavier than any verdict. You move deeper into the Forbidden City, where corridors narrow and doors multiply like riddles. Heavy bronze locks glimmer in lamplight, their weight promising both treasure and terror. Few men are permitted beyond these thresholds. Fewer still carry the keys, and always it is the eunuchs who hold them. Each key is long, iron or bronze, shaped like a dragon's claw. Hung from silken cords at the eunuch's waist, they clink softly as he walks, a sound as ominous as a blade unsheathed. For behind those doors lie the Empire's lifeblood, the Imperial treasury, the concubines' chambers, the sealed archives, even the yellow cabinet where the Emperor's decrees sleep in silence. Historians note with unease that eunuchs often controlled these locks. Some argue they were merely custodians, carrying keys on behalf of the Emperor. Others claim they were masters in all but name, for no minister could touch what lay behind bronze unless a eunuch chose to open the way. You picture it now. A minister arrives at the palace, scroll of petition in hand, demanding audience. The eunuch steps forward, keys jangling faintly. He unlocks the door, or he does not. That choice decides whether the Emperor hears the plea or whether it vanishes into silence. One legend tells of a eunuch who locked away an edict that would have condemned his allies. By the time it was found, months later, the Emperor's mood had changed and the document was useless. Another tale whispers of eunuchs stealing treasures from the vaults, hiding jewels and gold within the folds of their robes. Were these truths or slanders penned by Confucian scribes who despised them? Scholars still quarrel. You follow the echo of footsteps into a chamber filled with cabinets of red lacquer. Scrolls sleep within, sealed with yellow silk. A eunuch kneels before them, keys trembling in his hand. He does not look up. He does not need to. His silence is declaration enough. Without me, the Empire does not turn. The lock clicks shut. The sound is final, heavy, eternal. A whisper coils through the chamber, low and certain. Power is not the throne. Power is the key that opens its doors. And with that, the eunuch glides away, his keys clinking like chains in the dark. The corridors of the Forbidden City bend like a labyrinth, and at its hidden center resides not the Emperor, but his mother, the Empress Dowager, the Queen Mother. Draped in silk heavy as armor, her presence flows through the palace like incense. She is rarely seen, yet her voice threads through every decision. And her hand. It is the eunuchs. They kneel before her, shadows in black robes, heads bowed low. They carry her words to the Emperor, her judgments to the concubines, her warnings to ministers. She does not need to shout. A whisper through a eunuch's lips is enough to unmake careers, to banish rivals, to decide who rises into favor and who sinks into oblivion. Historians argue whether the Empress Dowager truly ruled through eunuchs or whether such claims were exaggeration. Some annals praise her for maintaining order. using eunuchs as instruments of stability. Others accuse her of corruption, weaving a web of intrigue where eunuchs became her eyes and ears, ensuring that no truth reached the throne without her consent. You picture it now. The Queen Mother seated behind golden screens, her face veiled, her gaze unseen. Before her, a eunuch kneels with a scroll pressed to his forehead. She does not speak aloud. Her words fall like mist. The eunuch bows lower, then withdraws. Hours later, an imperial decree emerges, signed by the emperor, but born from her whisper. One tale haunts the Ming records. When a favored concubine dared to defy the Empress Dowager, it was not the Queen Mother who confronted her. Instead, eunuchs entered her chamber at night. By dawn she was gone, her silks folded neatly, her name erased from the palace rolls. Was this legend or warning? Scholars cannot decide, yet the fear in later chronicles suggests that even whispers of such power were enough to chill the court. The eunuchs are not men of their own, not truly. They are extensions, shadows, tools, yet tools that can cut. For in serving the Queen Mother, they become her will made flesh. The lamps sway, and you hear it. A woman's sigh, low and lingering, carried through the corridors as though the walls themselves breathe her name. A whisper brushes your ear, soft as silk, sharp as command. The Son of Heaven may rule the empire, but the Mother rules the throne. The incense thickens, the shadows deepen, and the eunuchs glide onward, silent extensions of her unseen hand. The Forbidden City has birthed many shadows, but none stretched as vast as Wei Zhongxian. His name lingers in the chronicles of the Ming dynasty like a curse. A man once a servant who rose to eclipse ministers, generals, even the emperor himself. Wei was not born to greatness. He was born to poverty. Sold as a boy, cut by the knife, he entered the palace as another faceless eunuch among thousands. But where others bowed, Wei learned to bend. He studied the tides of favor, the subtle glances of concubines, the silences of the emperor. And in those silences he planted himself. Historians agree on this much. Wei Zhongxian gained the trust of the young Tianqi emperor. The emperor, more a craftsman than a ruler, loved carpentry and disdained court affairs. Wei, attentive and pliant, stepped into the void. He whispered where others commanded. He obeyed where others pressed. And soon the emperor trusted him more than ministers, more than family. From there his power swelled. Records tell of ministers exiled at his word, concubines elevated or discarded by his gesture. He filled offices with his allies, gathered wealth vast as provinces, and even built shrines in his own honor across the empire. Some chroniclers write that officials bowed to his name as though it were divine. Others call him demon, feeding off the weakness of a distracted emperor. You see it now. Wei Zhongxian standing at the emperor's side, head bowed, lips barely moving. A whisper, no louder than a breath, changes the course of policy, shifts armies, decides who lives and who dies. The emperor nods, content to return to his woodwork while Wei pulls the strings of an empire. Not all tolerated him. Scholars and officials, enraged, called him traitor, viper, shadow king. They wrote his name into memorials dripping with venom, calling for his destruction. Yet even as they cursed him, they trembled. For eunuchs carried their words to the throne, and words became nooses. One story whispers of a minister who accused Wei of corruption. Days later, the minister's family vanished, their home sealed, their name struck from every register. Was it Wei, or fear itself erasing them? Historians still quarrel, but shadows cannot reign forever. When the Tianqi emperor died, Wei's protection vanished, Stripped of power, hunted by his enemies, he took his own life. His corpse was desecrated, his legacy burned. Yet even in death his story remained, proof that a eunuch unmade by flesh could become the most dangerous man in China. The lamps quiver, the air thickens, and a whisper slithers through the silence, low and triumphant. The blade took my body. I took the empire. The sound fades. The shadow lingers. Wei Zhongxian's ghost still walks the corridors of history. The forbidden city glittered with jade and gold, but beneath its splendor flowed currents darker than ink. Eunuchs carried more than scrolls and cups. They carried whispers, perfumes, and sometimes death itself. They alone entered the concubines' chambers at night, bearing trays of fruit and bowls of sherbet. They alone stood beside the emperor's bed, holding lamps that flickered as shadows pressed close. And so it was through their hands that poison most often passed. A vial hidden among cosmetics, a powder dusted across silk, a tincture stirred into wine sweetened with honey. Historians still quarrel about their role. Some argue eunuchs were innocent, only obeying the commands of powerful women or scheming ministers. Others insist they were willing conspirators, shaping palace intrigue for their own survival. The truth, as always, is lost behind vermilion walls. One tale tells of a favored concubine who suddenly fell ill, her lips blackened as though kissed by ash. A eunuch had delivered her tea that evening. Another record whispers of a crown prince who never woke, his cradle guarded only by eunuchs. Were these coincidences, or shadows too thick to dismiss? Scholars cannot decide, but the fear of eunuchs bearing trays grew so strong that some emperors refused to eat without tasting first. And then, the perfumes. Bottles of rose oil, vials of musk, powders scented with sandalwood, all delights of the harem, all in the eunuch's care. Yet perfumes conceal as easily as they allure. A handkerchief steeped in invisible venom, a robe brushed with toxic balm, a veil infused with powders that seeped through the skin. Beauty became weapon, desire became trap. You imagine it now, a eunuch gliding through a corridor, lamp in one hand, tray in the other. The tray holds a goblet, steaming faintly, fragrant with lotus. The eunuch bows low, voice hushed, offering it to the emperor. The emperor drinks, trusting the silence. Hours later, the palace stirs with dread. Did eunuchs themselves plot such deaths, or were they merely instruments, compelled by orders they dared not refuse? The chronicles cannot agree. But the silence of the eunuchs was always dangerous, for silence makes perfect cover. The lanterns dim and you feel it, a fragrance rising, sweet at first, then bitter. It clings to your throat, tightening until a whisper breaks through the air. Every gift is a gamble. Every fragrance hides a fate. The scent fades, the silence remains, and the eunuchs glide onward, their trays gleaming in the dark. Beyond the crimson gates and golden roofs, hidden within the maze of the forbidden city, lies another city, a city of silence ruled not by emperors, but by eunuchs. This was the Directorate of Palace Eunuchs, sometimes called the Inner Court's shadow. Rows of offices, storerooms, and quarters stretched across courtyards where ordinary eyes never lingered. Here eunuchs managed supplies, oversaw construction, tallied treasures, and maintained the rhythms of palace life. They were not nobles, not scholars, and yet they ran the empire's heart. Historians still wrestle with this paradox. Some argue the eunuchs were indispensable, their work unseen but essential, the gears of a vast machine. Others condemn it as corruption institutionalized, a kingdom within a kingdom, where eunuchs became rulers of their own shadow court. The records speak of eunuch officials with ranks and titles, commanding thousands of attendants. They controlled the kitchens that fed the emperor, the granaries that stocked the palace, the workshops that forged the jade and silk presented at banquets. They supervised carpenters, gardeners, scribes, even actors for the court's theatre. Every nail hammered into palace wood, every gem sewn into an imperial robe, passed through eunuch hands. You picture it, a courtyard at dawn, eunuchs in black robes carrying ledgers and keys, shouting orders to artisans and servants. A scroll unrolled across a lacquered desk, its columns filled with inventories of gold, silver, bolts of silk, sacks of grain. A signature scrawled at the bottom, not the emperor's but a eunuch's. One tale tells of a eunuch who delayed payment to soldiers by withholding grain from the granaries. The troops starved, unrest spread, and the emperor's authority weakened. Another story whispers of eunuchs enriching themselves, skimming jewels and treasures into hidden chambers. Was this corruption, or simply survival in a world that offered them no legacy? Historians still dispute it. In time, the eunuch's city became infamous. Officials outside the palace seethed, calling it a parasite feeding on the empire. Yet emperors, cloistered and overwhelmed, relied on it utterly. Without the eunuch's city, the forbidden city itself could not breathe. The lamps in this hidden quarter flicker low. You hear ledgers rustle, coins clink, locks snap shut, and then a whisper slithers across the silence, smug and certain. The empire thinks it is ruled from the dragon throne, but its heart beats in our city of shadows. The sound fades. The ledgers close, and the eunuch's city remains unseen yet eternal. The forbidden city was not only walls and gates, but factions hidden within them. Among the eunuchs, alliances formed in silence, tighter than blood, more enduring than vows. They called no council, signed no treaties, yet their brotherhood ruled the palace like a phantom dynasty. In the stillness of midnight corridors, eunuchs whispered to one another, of favors won, of rivals weakened, of secrets ready to be sold. Their lives were bound by a common scar, the same blade that had unmade them, and from that shared wound, they forged loyalty stronger than steel. Historians argue whether such brotherhoods truly existed. Some claim they were loose alliances, fleeting and opportunistic. Others describe them as organized factions, with ranks, oaths, even hidden rituals of belonging. Whatever the truth, the chronicles drip with suspicion. Officials wrote of a palace within the palace, a secret order that bent the empire to its will. You imagine a hidden chamber lit by oil lamps, walls painted with dragons fading in the smoke. Eunuchs kneel in a circle, heads bowed, whispering names of ministers to be destroyed, concubines to be advanced, decrees to be delayed. Their voices never rise. Their decisions never appear in the records. But days later, officials fall, concubines vanish, edicts arrive too late. The Brotherhood's shadow is invisible but undeniable. One tale lingers of a eunuch who betrayed his circle. He was found days later in the lotus pond, face pale beneath the water, lips still parted as though whispering. No record marked his death. No trial condemned him. The silence of the Brotherhood had judged. The Emperor himself may not have known how deep these networks ran, or perhaps he knew and allowed them, preferring to let shadows balance shadows. Scholars still debate. Was the Eunuch's Brotherhood a symptom of imperial weakness or its silent strength? The lamps sputter, the shadows stretch, and you hear them. Not one voice, but many layered whispers overlapping like the rustle of silk. We are not one. We are legion. We are the silence that binds the walls together. The sound coils into the dark, then fades. The Brotherhood remains unseen, unbroken. Night descends like a silk canopy, and the palace changes its breath. drums fade to a distant murmur. Lanterns glow low and amber, as if the light itself has been taught to whisper. Here at the very heart of the Forbidden City lies the chamber that history rarely names and never fully describes. The Emperor's bedchamber, the stage upon which desire and dynasty are bound together by ritual. And only the eunuchs are allowed to set that stage. They arrive long before the Emperor. Barefooted for silence, robed for shadow, they move with a choreography older than any reign. One lifts the curtain cords, another measures the distance between lamp and pillow. A third counts the folds of the coverlet with the same precision a general counts soldiers. The chamber must not merely be clean, it must be compliant, obedient to the smallest intention. Nothing is left to chance, not the angle of the incense burner, not the height of the screen that shields the sleeping body from draughts and eyes. A brazier is kindled. Charcoal coughs once, then glows with a steady breath. A pinch of resin crackles and the air blooms with a scent of sandalwood and plum. A low table is wiped, then wiped again until the jade cup upon it holds not only water, but the illusion of stillness. Silk sheets are smoothed in long, unbroken strokes, each pass of the eunuch's hand erasing the crease of the day, the worry of ministers, the rumor of war. Historians still argue how elaborate these rites truly were. Some claim they were simple, born of necessity. Others insist the ritual bordered on the sacred, a nightly liturgy in which the body of the Son of Heaven was attended like a temple idol. The truth hides in the space between, ordinary gestures repeated until they gathered the gravity of prayer. You watch as two eunuchs kneel to test the bed's firmness with the back of their knuckles, never the palm, never the fingertips. Another checks the pillows, turning them each exactly once as though fate is folded within their cotton. A fourth traces a circle of light upon the floor by adjusting the lamps, ensuring that no shadow clings to the path from door to bed. Shadows here belong to eunuchs alone. A small lacquered chest is opened. Inside rest objects as plain as they are potent. A comb of bone, a cloth of snow-pale cotton, a sealed packet of powders labeled only with a single character brushed in gold. The comb will order hair, the cloth will cool a brow, the packet will never be used, and yet it must always be present. The chamber is a grammar of possibility, each item a word the night may or may not speak. There are rules you do not see written, but you feel them in the air like invisible knots. No eunuch may stand higher than the emperor's pillow. No voice may rise above incense. No lamp may burn past a certain height. If a concubine is summoned, the screen must be placed at this angle, not that. The curtains must fall in 2 layers, not 3. The floor must hold a rug that swallows sound as completely as deep water swallows oars. One eunuch lifts a tiny bell, its tongue wrapped in silk so that if it rings, it will ring softly, as if the sound itself were bowing. Another sets a porcelain basin near the bed's foot and tests the water with a single drop from his fingertip. Warm, not hot. Calm, not steaming. The emperor's sleep must be encouraged, never commanded. Historians still quarrel over the question of proximity. How close did the eunuchs stand? Close enough to catch a breath, or far enough to pretend the night belonged to another world? In diaries smuggled through the centuries, a minister once likened them to lamplight poured into human shapes, near and necessary. Intimate, yet always just outside the circle of heat, a eunuch approaches the headrest. He touches nothing. He only looks. His gaze moves like a brush along the grain of the wood, searching for splinters, for flaw, for treachery hidden in craft. Another kneels by the threshold and studies the seam where door meets stone, as if listening for the footfall of an invisible enemy. Nothing enters this room without passing through their attention first. Not scent, not silence, not sleep. Now the chamber is ready to receive. The eunuchs line the path from door to bed, heads lowered, hands tucked within sleeves. They are sentinels of softness, guardians of quiet. When the emperor arrives, he passes through them like a ship through harbor lights, guided by a constellation of human stars that do not dare to shine. One steps forward with the jade cup. He does not present it. He offers it, wrists crossed, a gesture that is both shield and surrender. Another lifts the emperor's robe from his shoulders, folding it in a single breath so no crease lingers, to mock the dignity of its wearer. K third, smallest of the three, adjust the screen so that the emperor is seen by no eye save heaven's. If a concubine has been chosen, her steps will be counted as well. The number of her bows, the length of her gaze, the lowering of her veil, all of it falls within the quiet dominion of eunuchs. They mark the hour, they set the pillow, they ensure the bed's edge receives her foot and not her fear. Desire in this room is never raw. It is ceremonial, braided to the empire's fate. You feel the pulse of the ceremony as a rhythm beneath the floorboards. A lamp sighs and steadies. The brazier exhales a slow sweetness. The emperor's breathing finds its pace, neither shallow nor deep. A treaty signed between knight and crown. The eunuchs recede like a tide, but they do not vanish. Two remain beyond the curtain, listening for unrest the way sailors listen for the change in wind. One guards the door, palms pressed together, not praying, merely waiting, which is its own form of prayer. Historians suggest they took turns through the night, gliding in to turn the wick, to lay a cloth upon a brow, to settle a coverlet disturbed by a restless dream. They were caretakers, yes, and sentries, for the most dangerous hour of a king's life is not on the battlefield, but in sleep, when enemies choose the softness of a pillow over the hardness of steel. A rumor breathes through the red walls. Once, after a banquet loud with victory, the emperor's lamp guttered in a way that was wrong. A eunuch saw the tremor, the flame too eager, the smoke too black, and moved. He lifted the lamp, found beneath it a powder finer than ash, and carried it away in both hands as though bearing a hot coal that could not be dropped. The emperor slept and woke, and never knew how close his breath had come to ending. Was this tale invention? A eunuch's boast? Or the memory of a life saved by attention, sharpened into love or fear? The archives offer no verdict. But the lamp that night burned low and clean. The hour deepens. The curtains stir only when the room inhales. If the emperor dreams, the eunuchs will not speak of it. If the concubine weeps, they will not see. If a messenger arrives at the threshold with news that could move armies, he will stop, because a eunuch lifts one quiet hand, and the empire, for this single fragile interval, chooses sleep. You stand in the doorway of the ritual and feel its strangeness, a power built not of command but of stewardship, a dominion that holds simply by holding back. The eunuchs govern the space where the empire is most vulnerable, that small chamber of unguarded breath. They are the last sound the emperor hears, and the first shadow he sees, and between those two moments they keep the world from entering. A final adjustment, a corner of silk eased into place, a wick turned down to the edge of darkness, a door drawn close until the latch kisses stone. The chamber settles. The empire sleeps inside one man's chest. From the corridor the whisper comes, not loud, not proud, merely true. We do not reign. We keep the night, and by keeping it we keep the throne. The brazier glows. The silence holds, and the eunuchs resume their vigil, faithful as lamplight that forgets to flicker. History has a cruel rhythm. As dynasties grew rich and emperors turned inward, The eunuch's shadow swelled until it spilled beyond the red walls. What began as whispers became storms, and what began as servants became sovereigns in all but name. The Ming dynasty is most often blamed. Confucian scholars wrote furiously that eunuchs bloated with power hollowed the empire from within. Memorials cursed them as parasites, gnawing at the root of heaven's mandate. When provinces faltered and armies starved, the blame fell not only on the emperor, but on the eunuchs who had diverted coin, delayed decrees, silenced warnings. Historians still argue whether this is fair. Some point to natural disasters, famine, foreign invasion, calamities no eunuch could control. Others insist the eunuch's corruption deepened every wound. Was it their ambition, or simply the empire's fragility that broke the throne? The debate lingers, as endless as the echo of their footsteps in the palace halls. One story tells of the Zhongxian emperor, the last Ming ruler. As rebels stormed the city, eunuchs fled the palace in panic, their silken shoes slipping on blood-slick stones. Some clung to treasures, hoping gold might buy mercy. Others hung themselves in the courtyards they once ruled, unwilling to face the fury of a collapsing world. The emperor himself, abandoned, hanged on Coal Hill. The eunuch's silence that night was final, and when the Qing rose, they too relied on eunuchs, though fewer, bound tighter by law, watched closely by ministers. Yet still, in the twilight of the dynasty, whispers of their corruption resurfaced. The cycle had not ended, only slowed. You walk now through a courtyard overgrown with weeds. The stones are cracked, the lacquer faded. The empire that once pulsed with ritual and intrigue lies broken, but the silence remains. It is the silence of endings, the hush that follows collapse. A voice stirs in that hush, ancient and resigned. Every dynasty falls, but the shadows remain. The dynasties are gone, their vermilion walls crumbled, their golden thrones left to dust. Yet the scars of the eunuchs remain, not carved in stone, but in memory, legend, and the bodies of those who once lived in silence. Every eunuch carried his wound like a second shadow. Some walked with jars sealed in silk, holding the parts of themselves taken by the knife. Others hid the pain beneath embroidered robes, never speaking of the blood that marked their beginning. It was a scar that defined them, that barred them from family, from legacy, from the simple rhythm of generations. Historians still argue about how they bore it. Some accounts describe them as bitter, nursing hatred for the world that unmade them. Others write of devotion, of eunuchs who poured their unspent love into serving the emperor with a loyalty unmatched by any minister. Perhaps both are true, two sides of the same wound. In folk tales, eunuchs often appear as figures of dread, pale-faced tricksters whispering poison, shadows lurking behind curtains. Children were warned, "Beware the one without sons, Gan, for he will take yours." Yet in other stories, they are guardians, selfless watchers who saved emperors from assassins, who kept the palace alive when all else failed. Memory itself could not decide whether to curse or revere them. You pause beside a temple wall where faint carvings linger. A name has been scratched out, the stone gouged as though memory itself tried to erase him. Yet the erasure becomes its own monument, a void where a man once stood, his silence echoing louder than any inscription. One account tells of a retired eunuch who lived in a small hut beyond the palace gates. Every night he lit incense before the jar he carried, bowing as though before an ancestor. He had no sons, no daughters, no clan, only the memory of what was taken. To outsiders it was grotesque. To him it was lineage of another kind. You feel the weight of their absence even now. A dynasty can crumble, a throne can vanish, but the scar remains stitched into the fabric of China's memory. It lingers in whispered curses, in haunted corridors, in the hush that falls whenever their name is spoken. A whisper rises soft as a sigh. We were unmade, yet we endured. Our scars are the empires, written where no ink can fade. The air grows heavy and the silence presses close. The scars remain. The Forbidden City today is no longer a court of emperors, but a museum of stone and silence. Tourists shuffle across courtyards once ruled by whispers, their cameras flashing where eunuchs once bowed. The throne gleams behind glass, the red walls glow with fresh paint, but the shadows remain, not in flesh but in memory. The eunuchs are gone. The last of them, Sun Yoting, died in the late 20th century, carrying with him centuries of secrets. With his passing, a lineage of silence ended. No more knives, no more jars sealed in silk, no more shadows gliding across the emperor's bedchamber. Yet their presence lingers, like the faint smell of incense long after the brazier has gone cold. Historians debate their legacy. Were eunuchs symbols of corruption, weakening dynasties with ambition and betrayal? Or were they survivors, men forced by cruelty into a role they transformed into power? Perhaps they were both, victims and wielders, scars and shadows. The archives cannot agree, but the palace remembers. The silence of its halls carries their weight. You stand in the hall of supreme harmony. The dragon throne rises before you, gilded, unreachable, empty. The air is still, yet you imagine movement in the corners. A flicker of black silk, a bowed head, the soft clink of keys at a waist. The tourists murmur unaware, but the palace itself remembers. A whisper drifts through the centuries, threading past stone and lacquer, through the silence of broken dynasties. We were never meant to rule. We were meant to vanish. Yet still you speak our names. The words fade, but the hush remains. For even now, long after the emperors and their courts have passed into dust, the eunuchs endure, not as men, but as memory. The silence is their empire, and it has never fallen. The night grows softer now. The vermilion walls fade into shadow. The golden roofs dissolve beneath the weight of stars. The footsteps of eunuchs, once sharp as keys on stone, drift into memory. What remains is only the hush, the kind of quiet that settles after centuries have sighed themselves away. You walk slowly through the empty courtyards. Lanterns sway, their flames no longer watchful, only weary. The air carries no perfume of sandalwood, no trace of incense. Only the cool breath of wind moving between stone lions that have seen dynasties rise and fall. The eunuchs are gone, yet their silence lingers. It lingers in the stillness of locked doors, in the echo of scrolls unrolled, in the faint rustle of robes that no longer pass. They were shadows once, keepers of secrets, guardians of sleep. Now they are only whispers, carried gently by time, softened until they become lullabies. You pause by an abandoned chamber. The bed is bare, the pillows gone, but the air remembers the ritual. You close your eyes and for a moment you can almost hear it. The careful folding of silk, the muted clink of keys, the breath of men who had nothing left to lose except their silence. The walls are still. The empire sleeps, and you too are invited into that sleep. Let the red walls fade. Let the keys grow quiet. Let the whispers soften until they dissolve into dreams. The eunuch's empire was silence. Tonight it becomes yours, sweet dreams.